Okay, season's greetings, Script Apart listeners. My name's Al Horner, and as you may have noticed, it is the last week before Christmas. The year's coming to an end, and so I figured let's finish 2024 strong. So all this week on this podcast about the first draft secrets of great movies and TV shows, I have interviews with the writers behind some of the best movies of the last 12 months that, for whatever reason, we didn't cover upon release. And Holy Prince of House Atreides, what a way to begin today. I have with me one of the most visionary filmmakers of our time. He's made one of the most pulse-racing crime thrillers of the century so far in the form of 2015's Sicario. He's made one of the greatest movies about the power of language of all time, in my opinion, 2016's Arrival. And in 2017 and 2021, he took on the impossible, not once, but twice, crafting first a sequel to one of the greatest blockbusters ever in the shape of Blade Runner 2049, and then a movie adaptation of a novel previously thought unfilmable, Frank Herbert's Dune. Yes, my guest today is the incredible Denis Villeneuve, stopping by for a chat about how his gargantuan Dune Part 2, starring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, helped define 2024. And I say that not just in the way that it dominated the box office, earning almost $750 million, which by the way is not bad for a hallucinatory epic full of spice-induced visual experimentation. No, I say that because the film is reflective of the year just past, because notions of fascism, faith, false messiahs, these things have all been uncomfortable parts of the backdrop of 2024, and Dune Part 2 manages to meditate on all of them. This is a movie of the kind of spectacle and philosophical multi-dimensionality that just doesn't come around all that often. Also, on a slightly more base level, sandworms rock, guys. In the spoiler conversation that you're about to hear, I had 30 minutes to ask Denis my most probing questions about his script. Questions like, was there ever a moment in the making of Dune Part 2 when he contemplated keeping Fahd Rautha Harkonnen, played by Austin Butler, alive to explore in further films because that character was so chilling? We get into what the ending of the film, which veers away from Herbert's source material, means for the future of the franchise, and if Dune Part 2 is a film that warns about colonialism, whether or not he believes that cinema has the power to actually dismantle those structures, or is more about expressing a kind of howl of resistance. It was a great chat, thanks to Denis for being such a wonderful, warm, insightful person to speak with, and an accidental part in the making of Script Apart. The last time I spoke with him was for a documentary that me and producer Cam made in 2017 about the music of Blade Runner. That was one of the first big projects that Cam and I collaborated on, and all these years later, here we are doing this podcast. So thanks to him, and a massive thank you also to our Patreon supporters, without whom this show would not be possible. If you like what we do on Script Apart and you want ad-free episodes, early access to episodes, the chance to ask your questions to upcoming guests, and much more, head to patreon.com/scriptapart, where for the price of a single monthly cup of coffee, you get all those perks and more. That address, one more time, is patreon.com/scriptapart. Okay, that's all the admin out the way, let's jump in. This is the astounding Denis Villeneuve discussing the first draft secrets of Dune Part 2. Thanks for listening, everyone. My name's Al Horner. This episode was produced, as ever, by Camille Demecq. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Denis, great to see you again. You're a filmmaker who's deeply interested in cycles of violence, cycles of history. Dune Part 2 is the story of the emergence of a so-called messiah, and messiahs are absolutely a cycle that we as a species seem to be trapped in. In our political spaces especially, we're obsessed with this idea of the one who's come to save us. What are your thoughts on why that is, Denis, and how did you build those thoughts into Dune Part 2?
I think that it's really deeply to the human condition, and not having any guidance, real guidance or clue about what we are doing here, and the idea of having to solidify our beliefs into a being, someone that could show us the way, is something that is tremendously bring a lot of comfort in one's heart, and I think that it's we've been through history, as you rightly said, looking for those people that could help us to find our way, our meaning into the world. And it's interesting to consider the fact that most of those figures came out of the desert, from the emptiness, from the space of death. And the problem with those figures is that they represent an absolute, and we attach with the idea of Messiah, the idea that they are beings closer to God, and with that comes a tremendous power, and it's a power that is questioned by Frank Herbert. Once a messianic figure gets close to politics, and it's a question I feel that is through the years, through the centuries, always relevant.
One of the small miracles of your Dune movies is how fresh they feel, despite the fact that so much pop culture, so much science fiction storytelling in particular, has that Frank Herbert DNA at its heart. So Neo's journey in the Matrix is the journey of Paul in Dune, and Star Wars, of course, was famously indebted to Frank Herbert. How conscious were you at the beginning of the potential for some of the beats in these Dune movies to feel familiar, and how did you overcome that challenge? Because Dune and Dune Part 2, they could have so easily felt like photocopies of a photocopy instead of the innovations in cinema that they are.
The thing is, it's a good question. The thing is, I took for right at the start from the I trusted the fact that I was going back to the original, and I made sure that I know that it's the idea of the chosen one is a trope, and it's something that is used over and over in contemporary cinema, specifically from Hollywood. And I myself, what drew me to Dune, what interests me into that book, isn't the idea of a chosen one. It's not a. I tried to deviate the movie from being about someone that has been chosen to more about someone that finds to happen to be at the right time at the right place, and has to deal with that context, and has to deal with the burden of being at the intersection of different powers that are fighting to get the natural resources, and it's that's why I tried at my best to go away from any kind of form of magic or a fantasy. I tried to make sure that Paul's journey would be as grounded as possible, that you could almost explain everything from a scientific point of view. Of course, there's still a little bit of a fantasy there, but as much as possible to make it grounded, to bring his journey as close to us as possible, so we can relate to it. And what interests me in Dune is the idea of a boy that consolidates his identity, that finally finds his home in another culture, and that for me is the art of Dune.
Was there anything from your own life, Denis, that you were able to bring to the table in understanding Paul and understanding the burden that he's carrying in Part 2?
But I will say that without going much into inner personal therapy, but I would say that the idea of trying to find a home is something that it's something that I've been constantly looking for. I think that's where I connected to Paul so strongly.
You've previously described how the downfall of some science fiction movies is when a film gets lost in its own ideas, Denis, which I took to mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, that truly great sci-fi movies, they have a really good balance of theme and story. You need narrative momentum as well as rich ideas. It can't just be characters in rooms pontificating. There needs to be action. How did you make that calibration with Dune Part 2? Was there a lot of chopping and changing the screenplay to make sure you had the right action set pieces in the right places?
First of all, I'm not here to preach or to say what is good or what is wrong. I mean, I think that what is interesting, and there's a different ways to approach science fiction. So, but I will say that for me, the science fictions that I love is the one where it's about the human journey, and that the human journey can be challenged by new technologies or new discoveries or another culture, etc. But it's where I found it interesting, and I think that a movie like Dune finds resonance because at the end of the day, it's much more of the journey. It's a focus on the journey of that boy discovering that culture, and in part two, discovering love and falling in love with a girl and embracing her culture and becoming a man in her contact, and that's where it makes it start to make sense to me. But honestly, it's that's the way I was able to adapt Dune. But I'm not I'm sure that there are, and we've seen movies that are intellectually more challenging and less, let's say, emotionally moving, that are absolutely fantastic movies. So I'm not preaching here.
So, what were the biggest changes across the development of the script for Part 2, Denis? Were there other set pieces you considered, other elements from the novel that you considered bringing in and eventually opted not to?
The big thing that I had to mourn the death of was the Mantat world. It's a decision that was taking progressively as we were adapting part one. The idea that I wanted the adaptation to be absolutely focused on the Bene Gesserit sisters, but I was still wanted to have some flavor of the Mantat, those human computers, those people that are mastered the mind at a level that can compete with the best computers, and AI being banned from that world. So it was an aspect of the novel that obviously is very interesting, but it felt like we were chasing too many chicken by it was like if it was another movie. It was, you could absolutely make a film about I could do a film, an adaptation of Dune, just focusing on the Mentat, and it could be a fascinating, very different project. But I was more interested by the religious aspect of it, that the idea of blending religion politics. So that was I wanted to do the main focus of the adaptation. And cinema an act of is a more visceral art form than literature, and I had to make my decisions. So the Mentat world is not really part of both movies.
Was that a decision you made very early on?
Yeah, it's an idea that came very early on, and that I had to mourn that decisions as I was doing the second part. I will say also that there are a lot of cultural manifestations of Fremen culture, rituals, dance, things that I shot, by the way, that are not in the film, that I wish had. It's just that movies, again, needs a necessary momentum, and I try to put as much of that culture on the screen as possible. I could have made a movie which much more, but I think the movie will have suffered from that. So I killed my darlings.
Can you tell me some of those things that you shot but ultimately decided to leave on the cutting room floor?
The again, it's always about it's. I will say this: when it's on the floor of the cutting room, it's dead. And once it's dead, I went through a mourning process, and when I don't want to talk about that anymore, because it's like it's things that don't belong to the film. The film reject them. I'm very I think, and you should ask that to my editor himself. But I think I'm pretty severe with my own material. I'm someone that takes no prisoners. It's always the movie that prevail, and I'm very harsh in the editing room. When a shot survived the cut, it's because it owned it, and so the dead shots, they are gone.
I'll just go ahead and assume it was a dance number that you cut. That feels like
Yeah, it was interesting.
Maybe for part three. Austin Butler's character in Dune Part 2 is, well, he's one of the most compelling screen presences of a character in recent times. Like the look, the voice, the violence, the kiss with his uncle. I know that he dies in the books, but I'm curious, like, as you began to write the character, as you began to devise what he'd look like, as you cast Austin and you began to realize, like, what he was going to bring to it, was there ever a moment where you wondered, should this be one of the places where I deviate from the source material? Should I keep this character alive to delve deeper into his darkness?
I fell in love with Fedorota. I mean, as what I fell in love with Austin Butler's Fedorota. I had high hopes. High hopes. I was like I put a lot of pressure on Austin, and I cannot express how much I was amazed, floored, and happy about what he created on screen. I was looking for that sex appeal. That's why I went to Austin. I was that dark sex appeal that I was looking for. That kind of a playful playboy uh, way of rock star attitude. That unbearable charisma that you can not watch him. When we were starting to do the first camera test, I remember going sleeping very well because I said, okay, is he right? He's walking in the right direction. Austin did it. He had big shoes to fill. I mean, fill. It's one of the most iconic character from the book, and it's a character that everybody were expecting. I had kept the character away from part one for specific reasons, and it needed to we needed to bring it home. And yes, it's true that the more I was shooting them within, the more I was getting excited, the more I was mourning the idea that I will have to kill him at the end. See, it's he brings a tremendous firepower in the film, and I'm grateful to all praise to Austin.
When we talk about the genius of Frank Herbert, like, what is it about that character and what he represents that makes him the perfect antagonist for this stage in Paul's journey? There seems to be like some interesting reflections, some interesting symmetry there.
Absolutely, it's all about symmetry. It's a mirror. It's the nemesis. It's a character that is the shadow of Paul. It's what Paul could become if he had not the proper education. He is someone that has been nourished with.
And of course, the first time we see this character's world, the first time we're allowed to kind of glimpse the environment that has bred him, if you like, it's in that iconic black and white. And I don't even know if black and white really scratches the surface of what it is, Denis. Can you tell me about like the idea of color as a storytelling weapon? Because it is something that you deploy across all your films. Like, is that something that you're thinking about during the screenwriting phase, or does that come later, working out how color is going to kind of add to the story that you're telling?
We filmmaker, we are many things, but we are painters as well. I mean, we use colors as a way of expression. And I was one thing that I loved in the book was Frank Herbert explore a culture through its a context, through the ecosystem, the nature, the environment, sculpting the humans. If you want to know about the Fremen, you observe the desert, and in the desert you will understand their culture, their technology, their belief, their religion, their behaviors, their way of their poetry, and that relationship with the environment fascinated me, and it's one of the things that I love in the book. It's so rich, and but in the Harkonnen world, I felt it was we are less on Gedi Prime on the book, on the Harkonnen home world, and I was feeling that there was the planet being disconnected. It's a Gedi Prime, the Harkonnen world. Has killed nature. It's an industrial planet. It became a plastic planet, and I was like looking for manifestation of the environment that could give us an idea on how their psyche, their fascist psyche, has been created in some part of it, and the idea that sunlight could be a clue. That what if the sunlight on Gedi Prime subtract, kill colors instead of revealing the colors like in our world. And I always love to try to play with the idea that the laws of physics are not necessarily the same in other world, that our knowledge, earth knowledge, is limited, that there are other ways of other way other realities out there that could be quite different from ours. And the idea that a dark sun, will subtract color like that really excited me. First of all, it will create a kind of Nazi fascist look to the world, remembering us of World War II iconic images of those dark times. And also it will inform us about the brutality, the homogeneity of this world, a binary world. Uh, and it would also make the planet very recognizable. It's like you would not have to explain that you're on this planet. You are on Gedi Prime, obviously, and of course, Greg Fraser, my cinematographer. It was in the screenplay. It was embedded in the DNA of the screenplay when I described the planet. But Greg, of course, as a cinematographer, loved the idea to try to shoot in black and white, and he came with the idea of using IR, infrared cameras. I was asking Greg to brainstorm with me about how could we bring a kind of eerie alien black and white, and he had this infrared idea, and which with some test appears to be the best idea. And the only problem with infrared is that when you shoot in infrared, there's no way back. I mean, what you do is done. I mean, it's you shoot with infrared, the camera captured a part of the spectrum that is usually rejected, and kills all the colors and just capture the infrared. So it creates that kind of eerie vampire feeling when the skin is translucent, very milky translucent skin, and with the eyes being like insect eyes, very piercing. And it really created a strong atmosphere, nightmarish atmosphere to the planet that I was very happy with.
We should talk about the ending, Denis. Part 2 makes a fairly massive deviation from the books in its final act. At the end of the movie, Chani essentially seems to reject who Paul has become. She refuses to bow to him. And in the books, Paul may have a new wife, but she's still kind of his true love. She's still his confidant. Why make that departure from the source material? And what's to be read into that change in terms of how the next film, or films plural, might kind of stand alone entirely from the books? Because Dune Messiah and Children of Dune, they're stories that rely on those two characters remaining together.
It's a good question, and it was the first decision that was made when John Speth and I started this adaptation. The idea was that we knew that we will be walking on a razor edge to bring that movie on, because the first book has been wrongly perceived as a celebration of Paul Atreides. It's something that obsessed Frank Herbert. When the first book came out, he was really disappointed by the way some readers saw the book as a celebration of a hero, and he wanted to do a cautionary tale, a warning against messianic figures. So in order to correct that perception, he wrote a second book, small book, called Dune Messiah, and where we understand more clearly his ideas, where Paul became a dark figure. And knowing that, we made this adaptation, hoping that we'll be closer to Frank Herbert initial ideas. The idea was to be more faithful to Frank Herbert than to the book. and in order to do so, we use Shani. Shani, as you rightly said in the book, is more like a believer. She walks in the shadow of Paul. But in the movie, I gave her her own agenda, meaning that she's a character with a very specific point of view on her reality. She doesn't believe in the religion that comes from outside, and she wants the Fremen to be freed by themselves, not by any foreign power, which will be again a form of colonization. She's against the colonialism of the idea of colonialism, and she's from a younger generation that doesn't have the burden of the alienation of colonialism. And she, it was important in the story that it will be all structured on their relationship, that through their relationship we will understand the, the the pressure of the politics of the world, and through the separation we'll understand where Paul deviated from his trajectory, and where she feel betrayed, and she become our moral compass. Shani is our moral compass. She and that's why in the third act, and that's what you refer to, is it's a different ending where Shani judges Paul and feel betrayed by Paul, and doesn't embrace his journey in the same way. And I felt that it made Shani first again our moral compass, so we can land the idea at the end that it's a cautionary tale, and also it make her a more substantial, more modern, more contemporary character that I feel much more interesting. Yeah.
Has it complicated the writing of the third film? Because, as I say, like, you're not able to rely quite so keenly on the source material. You've backed yourself into an interesting corner to work your way out of.
I will say that I'm not. I always cautious to talk about things that don't exist yet. I mean, it's like the third movie is I'm writing right now, so it's like something that I feel like there's always a vulnerability when you write. It's like, and I think that I want to keep some surprises. But let's say that no, in the contrary, it's a lot of fuel to write another movie. That tension between both characters.
I said at the top of this call that your films often spotlight these kind of cyclical parts of human nature that depressingly we're unable seemingly to break out of. For example, I've been thinking a lot about Arrival recently as a result of the conflicts in the world at the moment, and what that film had to say about the necessity of dialogue, but also the kind of impossibility of dialogue, because human nature's default mode is one of violence. That's just something that's been kind of resonating in my head of late. Do you believe, Denis, that cinema can help disseminate ideas that help break those cycles? Is that part of why you do what you do?
Absolutely. Cinema is a very powerful art form of expression, if not the most powerful. And you can generate empathy. You can generate a dialogue. You can build bridge. I say that with humility. I mean, it's like not I think it's a corpus of movie, an amount of movie that can build a bridge. We need, but any art form is important in that regard to build bridges between humans, between cultures, between countries. It's like, but I believe that cinema can be an act that bring us closer together, and that's the beauty of this art form, where you can bring ideas and emotion on the screen to, and again to increase empathy between humans. And I believe that it's a form that can has a way to it can help. It can help.
You've said, Denis, that the next film will be your last in the franchise. Assuming that the franchise forges on afterwards without you, as studios are wont to do, are there particular emerging filmmakers or even established filmmakers who you would personally love to see step into the world of Arrakis?
That is a crazy question, and I'm not ready to. It's like, well, Denis, your wife will quit you, and she will. Can you see any husband out there that could be interesting for her? No, sir, I cannot think about it. but honestly, if it happens, I'd say Dune belongs to everybody, and I'll be very excited if ever there's a fourth movie that happens after something like that, and there's a filmmaker out there that will want to go behind the wheel. I'll be there to help, definitely, with passion and humility, because it's a world I absolutely adore.
What do you think will be the emotion for you when you do close this chapter of your life? It's been over a decade for you. The last time I saw you, Denis, you were in the midst of Blade Runner 2049. Dune was all ahead of you, and you had so much trepidation about taking on that beloved sci-fi project. You've since made this one, like, this huge chapter of your career, this huge chapter of your life. What do you think it will mean to you to say goodbye after the next film?
there's a moment when I realized that I did the adaptation of the first book, that I did the what one of my biggest dreams. I had a strong emotion, and I'm still pitching myself, and it's strangely it takes me to process the idea. It will take me time to process the idea that I had the chance to make this adaptation. But to tell you how much I could not quit the world. I still have the energy and the inspiration to go back on Arrakis at least a third time. I'm not the mourning process will be long. It's I say that because every time, after all these years, all these decades, every time I open this book, I still find the same deep joy, and it's a joy of being amazed, mesmerized, hypnotized by the poetry of Frank Herbert, and I'm just grateful that the flames was kept alive all those years.
I think people are going to have the same relationship with your films, Denis. I should let you go. We're out of time, but I've enjoyed this conversation so much today, Denis. I love your work. I've loved all our interactions over the years, and I'm really looking forward to part 3, not least because I now know there's going to be a dance number in it.
Okay, that's a challenge. All right. It was nice talking to you. I need to think about that dance number now. Take care. Thanks for the nice conversation.
You've been listening to Script Apart. Thank you so much for tuning in. A reminder that if you want to help the show continue to grow, you can join us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/scriptapart or clicking the link in today's show notes. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.